This is the November 21st meeting. We'll note that all commissioners are present. Are there any changes to the order of business? There are no changes. Chair to entertain a motion to approve the order of business.
Make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Next item then is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you'd like to discuss?
Mr. President, I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson? Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzler?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to tab number 4, which is the non-timetable agenda. And the first item we have there is to hear a presentation by Pastor Ron Hudson. So welcome, Pastor.
Thank you very much. If I may, I would like to open up with a word of prayer, if that is acceptable.
I think it is.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Holy Father, I just want to thank you for your blessings on this community. Father, I want to thank you that we are experiencing economic prosperity. I want to thank you that we are seeing a population growth. I want to thank you, Lord, that we have an amazing amount of employment available for everybody. But along with these blessings, Lord, we recognize that there are great challenges. And so, Father, I want to lift up the City Commission to you. And I would pray for your wisdom in their decision-making process. Lord, our wisdom is finite, but yours is infinite. And so, Lord, we just ask your intercession and your manifestation upon this organization as they continue in their business tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much. I'm coming before you tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Pastor Ron Hudson. I am the senior pastor at Calvary Chapel in Dickinson. But I'm coming before you in my role as the chairperson of the Dickinson Ministerial Association. The Dickinson Ministerial Association is an organization that has been in operation for quite some time, and yet we fly under the radar in most instances. And so many people don't know who we are. We are an organization that corporately we have had community ecumenical services in the past. And we have a transient fund that we collect from the various churches in order to help the transients that are coming through town that need financial assistance. We are in partnership with many organizations here in the city, including the City Police Department, Social Services of Stark County, Community Actions Partnership, and several other too. But the reason I'm coming before you now is because of a ministry that we're involved in that we think is of the utmost importance to this commission and to the city, and that's that ministry of prayer, and specifically praying for our community leadership, praying for you guys in the city commission especially, because we recognize the task that you guys have is just monumental. You know, in looking at what's going on in our community and our city, there's so much going on here. And going into the future, there's decisions that are going to be made that are going to affect each and every citizen and the future citizens that are going to be a part of this community also. And I just wanted it to be known that we corporately as an organization, we're praying for you guys, and we're praying for the community leaders in all aspects of their various positions. We're not only praying corporately, but we're praying individually as pastors, priests, and ministers who gather together. In fact, there's a group of us that gather on a weekly basis, a small group of us to pray for the city, and a vast majority of us pray individually every day for you guys. And monthly, when we get together as an organization, as the Dickinson Ministerial, we pray for you guys corporately too. And we think that's important, and we just wanted to let you guys know that you know, so many times, you know, we as pastors, we try not to be community activists, you know, in as much as I don't really think that is our mission, to go out and march in the streets and protest, you know, but it certainly is our ministry to do what we can do, and that's to seek the intervention and the assistance of an almighty God in the events that go on in this community, and to pray for you guys and to pray for his wisdom to empower you, pray for his discernment too. And I just wanted to share with that. I won't take up any more of your time, but I just thank you for the opportunity to come before you and present this to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pastor.
You're very welcome.
And I'm sure we all appreciate the prayers. Okay. Anybody have anything that they want to add?
Thank you.
Mr. Kessel?
Thank you, President Johnson. I'd just like to also add that we had a member of the Ministerial Association on the Unmet Needs Committee back when the tornado went through Dickinson, and actually the chairperson of that committee was a member of the Ministerial Association. And so that was a group that did a lot of great work, and they all did it on a voluntary basis. So thank you for that.
Okay. Well, Mrs. Johnson, I think we're ready to hear the financial report. Are we still solvent?
Yes, we are.
We are, good.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. I'll highlight a few items from our financial report through October. We'll begin with the general fund report. With 83% of our year completed, our property taxes equal $3 million, and we're 98% collected compared to budget. Our other taxes and fees, which include things like financial institution tax and franchise fees, is 96% collected compared to budget. Our intergovernmentals include revenues we receive from state and local governments, such as the highway distribution tax and the oil production tax, and is 83% collected compared to budget. We have received $500,000 of oil production tax money in July and $1 million in September, due to our increase in mining-related jobs in 2011 to 9.2%. These amounts have been moved to our new Oil Impact Fund, which is where we will account for all revenues associated with oil impact. Our licenses, fees, and services includes things such as building permit revenue and oil royalties, and is 70% collected compared to budget. The building permit revenue is up 45% over last year. Our municipal court fines are also included in this line, and are 23% more than last year. Our sales of city lots and equipment, we have sold $1.7 million of city lots through October. Our total general fund revenues equal $8.9 million through October, and we're 96% collected compared to budget. Our general fund expenses through October include general government, which includes administration, court, finance, and IT, and is 85% expended compared to budget. This increase is mostly due to attorney fees and prisoner housing costs. Our public safety, which includes police and fire, is 77% expended compared to budget. Our engineering and streets is 74% expended compared to budget. And our cultural services, which includes our museum and forestry, is 76% expended compared to budget. Our contingency and reserve includes the West River Community Center Major Maintenance Reserve and our contingency account that now includes our 20% share of the Regional Transit Building. Our total general fund expenses equal $7.1 million through October, and we're 76% expended compared to budget. In our enterprise funds, this slide shows our water and wastewater funds, which we have combined in 2011 to better reflect like operations. Our revenue is $5.5 million through October, which is 109% collected compared to budget, and 29% more than last year. This large increase in revenue is due to the bulk water sales at our water vendor. Our expenses and capital outlays total $4.7 million, which is 84% expended compared to budget.
Mrs. Johnson, on the wastewater fund, for the last 2 months of the year, are you expecting many capital outlay expenditures for the balance of the year?
We do have some projects that we will be finishing, but I'm not exactly sure the dollar amounts that are still outstanding, but there will be some.
Okay.
Our solid waste fund also shows an increase in revenue due to added growth in residential and commercial accounts. Our revenue is $2.3 million, which is 103% collected compared to budget and 18% more than last year. Our expenses and capital outlays total $1.8 million, which is 68% expended compared to budget. In our sales tax reports, In the 1% sales tax fund, we received $566,000 of revenue in October, which is up 40% for the year. Our expenses include $666,000 paid towards job creation and senior programs, and $800,000 towards our Badlands Activity Center pledge. Our 0.5% sales tax, we received $283,000 of revenue in October, which is also up 40% for the year. Our expenses include $822,000 towards the West River Community Center bond. In our hospitality tax, we received $86,000 of revenue in October, which is up 33% for the year. Our expenses total $432,000 and includes our BAC pledge payment, the CVB Special Events Grant and their subsidy, and the Parks and Rec lighting grant. Our occupancy tax breakdown shows revenues and expenditures total $424,000 through October. This is a 59% increase over last year. All occupancy tax revenues collected, minus a small admin fee, are paid to the CVB monthly. In our street projects report, we received $118,000 in revenues, and we've expended $941,000 towards those projects through October.
So I have the kind of the similar question on the street projects now. Do we have more monies that we will expend between now and the end of the year?
I believe we still have dollars to be expended, and then we'll see a large revenue increase in December when the sales tax monies all come in. We'll transfer 50% of the 1% as far as revenue into this account as well.
Right. Are you expecting, Mr. Soren, a large expenditure in the last 60 days?
We haven't paid anything on our 2011 Urban Roads project, so that'll be coming from the DOT here shortly, I would suspect, which is, I believe, just under $200,000.
The reason I'm asking is it appears our cash balance is growing here. Plus, I think in that 50% fund, I think you still have some monies that haven't transferred into the street fund. And I think we may have to, look at the needs not only for year end, but for the next year or two. If we're building up cash reserves here, the ordinance says that money can be used for streets or other infrastructure. If you don't need it all for streets, we have some other infrastructure needs. So that's kind of where I'm going. So
Because of some of the activities we've had this year, we didn't get our mill and overlay project done. It came in too high, so we ended up rejecting those bids on that, and we were unable to do a seal coat project, which is part of the reason the cash balances did increase this year.
So we just deferred some maintenance then.
And we were hoping to try and double those projects next year to get caught back up.
So we can't raid that fund then for?
I would like you to hold off for a little while.
And in that regard, Mr. President, Mrs. Johnson, the projected revenue, I presume, includes that transfer you're talking about?
Correct.
Okay.
In our development impact fee program, we have that broken down into residential and commercial schedules. These schedules show the impact fee projects that have been approved and the funds available for future projects. The residential program stands at a negative $27,000 at the end of October. The timing of construction compared to special assessments received will help alleviate this negative balance. And our commercial schedule includes a balance available for future commitments of $1,078,000. The 2011 budget reforecast highlights the general fund revenues that have been reforecast since the budget was approved last September. Those are some of the highlights of the financial statements through October. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Do we have comments or questions for her?
I have one question. We did a reforecast of revenue, 4 or 5 months ago, I guess. I know that at the time I questioned whether or not our projection on sales tax was optimistic. It appears now, looking at it that it wasn't. It appears that we will make that revenue. Would you agree?
I agree. We're right on target right now with 2 months left to go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, would there be a motion to accept the financial report?
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel? Aye. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Pastor Hudson, you're fine where you are, but I just wanted to make an additional comment. You know, I hear it from many community members, and I suspect my fellow commissioners do, but I sense a great deal of support for our commission and appreciation for not only the commission, but the staff for the time and effort that we end up putting in. I think the community is very much in tune with, very much aware of the significant impact that energy development is having on us, all of us, not just city staff and the commission. But I hear many times that they say, we know you're busy, we know you're putting in lots of hours, and I generally hear a thank you too with that. So we have a great community, and you know, I feel that there's quite a bit of empathy and support for what the city, the county, school district are all going through. So thank you. Okay, precinct and voting places. We have an ordinance here, and Mr. Colling, are you introducing this?
President Johnson, I'll introduce, and then I'll defer to Attorney Cooling shortly thereafter. The item before you is a possible change in the precinct and voting places that the City of Dickinson has. As you are aware, we are, because of our bicentennial census, legislative redistricting has gone on and been completed. They have redistricted the area, and Stark County, whom we have a joint election agreement with, would like to change the amount of precincts that we have within our community. The board over there shows the precinct map as it exists today per current ordinance. We have 7 different precincts in our community. They have not been updated so far to reflect recent annexations. What is being suggested today is that instead of having the 7 separate and distinct precincts, is that we use legislative boundaries as they exist today as those precincts. So we would move from essentially these 7 to 2. The 2 districts that we have are delineated currently by the Heart River. In speaking with Auditor Kay from Stark Development, Kay Haig, she is anticipating that Broadway would become the line of delineation once the voting does occur. So I have asked Attorney Colling to draw up an ordinance that would reflect a 2-precinct system based on legislative districts rather than the current 7. And there's a few other things in that ordinance that are remnants from days gone by that he may be able to address as well that could also leave the ordinance. Attorney Colling?
Mr. Kessel, before we get there, could you take a minute for the public, and I think it would be good just to explain the county's role in an election and how that's set up, unless, Mr. Colling, you're going to do that.
Sure.
I think a lot of people think that the city is running its own election and all of that.
Commissioner Jackson, that is a good question. We have actually contracted with Stark County, and they essentially run all of our city elections. When it comes to establishing polling places, establishing workers, developing ballots, all of those things that are associated, counting the voted ballots, that is a contract that exists between Stark County and the City of Dickinson. And so they are the operations end of that voting process. They go to a great deal of training to be that, to have the expertise in that area. Ultimately, it is our decision on whether or not, how many precincts we have and where our voting centers are within our community, but we have largely contracted the operations of those things to Stark County, and they've done an admirable job, I must say. So I hope that answers your question.
That does.
Mr. President, Commissioners, just a couple of comments on the ordinance. You'll note in the ordinance, proposed ordinance in your books, the 7 precincts that we have in ordinance to date are very detailed out and have specific outlines of where they lie. One of the problems with that is, as the city expands, those precinct boundaries pretty quickly become outdated. As our boundaries change, our precinct boundaries would have to change as well. One of the benefits of the proposed ordinance that Mr. Kessel spoke about is if we do it by legislative districts only change once every 10 years, and we will have a better opportunity to keep our precinct boundaries up to date as the city expands and grows. Historically, there are really 2 reasons why cities divided up into precincts. And the main one was that you had a separate polling center in each precinct. If you lived in the northwest precinct in the city, you went to a voting place in the northwest corner of the city. And recent practice has changed that. We've gone to a polling center system so that everyone in the city and really everyone in the county can vote in any one of the precincts or any one of the voting centers, rather, that the county adopts. So the main reason for having precincts at all has really vanished, given the modern way in which we have organized our voting system. So the proposed ordinance that you have is really a simplification of the voting system, and I think it is something that is going to be consistent with the way Stark County wants to run our elections, and may provide a benefit to the city as well.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. Does this ordinance have a number?
Mr. President, this would be ordinance 1435.
Okay. Any comments or questions here by commissioners? Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this proposed ordinance? If so, you can comment now by coming to the podium and stating your name, and we'll hear your comments. There's no one from the public?
Mr. President, I think that perhaps the big question that anybody from the public might have is the number of polling places. Will that change from what we had in the last election to what we would have under this new ordinance?
Commissioner Jackson, in my conversations with Auditor Haig, she has indicated that they intend to have 2 different election centers in the city in any upcoming election. One of those would likely be at the Armory and the other likely at the Badlands Activity Center. As I stated earlier, we do have some influence over the quantity of election centers. If we wanted to see a 3rd one or a 4th one, we do have some ability to influence that if we choose to. But those are the 2 that I believe that they are moving forward with at this time. Changes still could be made.
Thank you.
Okay. Would there be a motion regarding ordinance 1435?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner.
move to approve ordinance number 1435. So 35?
That's correct.
Okay, 1435.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Ullman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So the motion carries. We'll go to item D. This is a possibility of a contract with Vanguard regarding revaluing the commercial and industrial property, and Mr. Hirschfield will speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. That's kind of a follow-up to Mr. Bob Eller's presentation from a month ago. Due to the activity that we have in our real estate market here, seen some changes in value for our commercial properties, and don't currently have the staff to take care of that in-house. We're asking to go out of our office here to Vanguard, who does our CAMA software, and and have them come in and do a commercial reevaluation. That'll kind of allow us to get everything back up on parity and have it valued at what its current value is in that 95 to 100% range that the state asks of us. The per parcel fees that they're asking for is $285 for a small commercial, $1,000 for a large commercial, and $15 for a vacant lot. When we did this quote, I believe it was in August, the parcels that we had, the estimate on that was around $290,000, $300,000. Of course, we keep adding to that, and by the time 2014 comes and they're actually out here doing it, we'll have even more parcels, so a total exact dollar amount we don't have readily available, but the per parcel expense is what we're contracting for. I guess I'll entertain any questions you have of me.
Any comments or questions?
Is that consistent with other communities? Are you finding that, the price?
The
The 285 for small commercial, 1,000 for large commercial?
I didn't check to see what other reevaluations, excuse me, are. The ones that I know of are also going through Vanguard, so I'm assuming they're the same. The only reference I have would be to what a private appraisal cost would be, and it would be 2 to 3 times what this here is, so we're getting a pretty good discount for the multiple parcels.
Thank you.
They did this 11 or 12 years ago for the city. You wouldn't happen to know what we paid 11 or 12 years ago, do you?
No, sir, I do not have that figure, but you are correct. I think it was in 1999 or 2000 was the last time they did this for us. So.
Okay. Well, by state law, we have to come into compliance. We either do it ourselves or we contract with someone to do it. The alternative would be to employ an additional 2 or 3 people and put them on this project, I would guess.
To stress too, we're not out of compliance by the state statutes of being in the 95 to 100%, as we are able to go back and use sales from 3 years ago. That's actually helping us a little bit at this time to be able to use those dated sales and keep everything in line. We know that today's sales are not valued at what, or our value is not what today's sales are.
Right.
Our compliance is not we're not out of compliance with that. But, you know, as we add more sales, and there'll come a time we'll have our 30 sales in 1 year, we'll see a big increase at that time, and that's not ever very popular. So
Yeah.
if we can avoid that, so much better.
So you're asking for our approval to enter into a contract for these amounts then?
That is correct, and the bulk of the work will be done in 2014. I don't have the contract in front of me to see how the payment schedule is, but I do not believe very much of that expense comes out before that, if any. And final delivery of the finished project, or project, yes, would be January of 2015, so quite a bit of that expense will be clear out to then.
Okay. If there's no other comments, would there be a motion regarding this request?
I'd make the motion to approve the contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
With a motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel? Aye. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. It's almost 5 o'clock. We have some timetables. I think we'll go to the 5 o'clock timetable. That's to hear an update on the Best Friends program, and that'll be given by Chris Fair. So, Mrs. Fair, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson and Commissioners, for allowing me a little bit of time on your agenda. I'm not here to ask for anything tonight. Just to give you a little update on what's been going on with Best Friends. And I'll just do a quick little review of Best Friends for you. As you know, we were, am I clicking the right button? Sorry. Is it this one? Oh, this one? Oh, okay, I was clicking the wrong button, sorry. Okay, now I'm totally off. Where am I? Okay. There we go. All right, so Best Friends was formed 17 years ago to provide those positive activities and role models for kids in our community, and it met the community need that back then there was apparently students were spending some time doing some maybe not positive activities, but also having the potential for getting into some trouble. So that met a community need, and they decided a mentoring program would work well for our community. And they modeled it after the Big Brother, Big Sister mentoring program. And we do serve Region 8, which is the 8-county area. 95% of the kids in our program are from Dickinson and Stark County. The important thing about Best Friends to remember is it's a prevention program, which means the youth in our program are not in trouble now, but they would have the potential because of various factors in their lives. So how do I get to the next one, you guys? Just keep going? Okay, so just pretend that's not happening. There we go. Okay, Best Friends Mentoring Program today. We're serving kids in ages 6 to 16 in our 3 programs: school-based mentoring, which is when the mentor goes to school, meets with the child. They usually eat lunch and play on the playground or do some academic activities. Community-based mentoring is that traditional mentoring model where the mentor and the child meet outside of school and work time, and they might be going to football games or baking cookies or talking or building model airplanes. And then our newest program is the literacy mentoring program. We're working with Dickinson State Teacher Education Department, where we're placing tutors who are trained in schools one-to-one or with very small groups of children to help them achieve proficiency. We've got about 30 kids on our waiting list, and they're getting matched pretty quickly. Kids in the program have been identified as at risk for future educational failures, such as dropping out of school, lower grades, or they may be struggling, delinquency, or risky behaviors. Okay, so if you look at that, what am I usually? I'm usually saying that we have 20 little boys on the waiting list, and we need some help. Right now, I've got more little girls than little boys on the waiting list. That's pretty unusual, and here's why. See, we started a Teammates program last year. That's a new thing we're doing. We've been working with Dickinson State teams. They can be matched in any of those 3 programs. So we have the baseball team. Just about everybody on the Blue Hawks baseball team is a mentor. Basketball team, about half the guys are, and then there's a couple other teams we're waiting on. So last year when we started this program, we cleared about 30 little boys off our waiting list, and we had actually men waiting to be mentors, which was unusual for us. So the mission of Teammates is to positively impact the community by inspiring youth to reach their full potential, which is a lot of what sports and coaching is all about. So you see some of our more well-known DSU athletes up there with their little buddies. That's been pretty exciting for us. So we're growing, like I just said. Here's our matches by year. You can see how we've grown. We've grown over 20% between 2009 and 2010. And for calendar year 2011 that we're in, we already have more matches than last year. We think we're going to get to that 250 mark. That's going to be about an 11% increase. I also just learned that Best Friends is the largest mentoring organization in North Dakota. So that, we have a lot to be proud of here. We have a lot of volunteers who care about our community and care about our kids. But until you put it on a graph, it's kind of interesting just to see this and realize how many children each year are being helped. So we can't do it without the community. To make our program successful for the youth, we need to collaborate and partner with many agencies. Of course, the Police Department and Badlands Human Service Center conducts our background checks for us. Dickinson Public and Catholic Schools for matching our kids and providing space. Dickinson Parks and Recreation, of course, the City of Dickinson, the Regional After School Program, Dickinson State, of course, and North Dakota State University and their Amachi Mentoring Partnership. And I think I mentioned this, may have mentioned this to you last year, but speaking of NDSU, we have, several of our staff members are paid through a collaborative grant that NDSU has for mentoring. It pays one full-time equivalent coordinator position and 2 part-time positions. And the funding for those 3 positions and for another full-time position in our office will run out in June of 2012. So we're looking to raise funds for these positions with the year-end friendship drive that we're doing right now and our other special events. So what we have is myself as the full-time director. We have 2 full-time program coordinators. When you think about 250 matches, they say nationally a program coordinator should manage 60 to 70 matches, and I'm kind of making them do more than that because there's only 2 to do 250. So we have 2 part-time program support specialists. We just got our VISTA volunteer. She showed up first part of November. We're so excited to have that program support. And then we do depend on DSU interns for our office help. We're scanning and making digital copies of all of our old files to be more efficient. And then we have other volunteers for office help. And our office hours are 9 to 4, although usually people are there before 8 and much after 5 or 6. Okay, so here's our impact. This shows you 3 years. The light color is 2009, purple is 2010, and brown is 2011. But if I could just tell you a little bit about the improvements. So for our 2010-2011 school year, 94% of the youth improved their academic competency. That was a 12% increase over 2009. 94% improved their attitude, which was a 6% increase. 94% improved their behavior, which was a 4% increase from 2009 and stayed the same as last year, which is phenomenal to have kids keep their attitudes be the same. And 88% improved their social skills, which is a 4% increase. So that is, it's phenomenal what can be done with just an hour a week with a caring, trained mentor. Okay, so a little bit more about our impact. 94% of our parents reported they were satisfied with the services we provided. Kids were less likely to use violence to solve a problem, and the kids had confidence to stand up to bullies. Okay, nationally, national studies, we know that mentoring works. Youth enrolled in a mentoring program are less likely to skip school, less likely to begin using illegal drugs, less likely to hit someone to solve a problem, and less likely to begin using alcohol. Okay, here's our challenges. You know, the mentoring works. It's good news for kids because, you know, a child who doesn't graduate from high school is 8 times more likely to end up in prison. So investing in youth now really will pay big dividends for our community in the future. So challenges. Now that you've seen the good that Best Friends does, we'll tell you a little bit about challenges, and you've heard a little bit about the impact of the energy industry. We've got that influx of workers coming into our community. We've got an increased demand for services, obviously. Families have moved here in search of employment. While we're all trying to absorb that impact, Best Friends is also trying to absorb the impact. We're seeing a huge demand for our services. We also see that many of the families are socially challenged. They're not connected to the community, they may not be connected to services, and they have some social challenges that we're trying to assist them with. We're doing a lot more referrals than we've ever done, ever probably in Best Friends. Many of the kids in our program are behind in school. Many don't have a mailing address because they're living in a camper somewhere. A couple of the kids in our program last year came to school on the first day not speaking English. And we did have a couple of bilingual volunteers who spent some time in their classrooms and helped them out. So that was nice. We were able to do that for them. But the good news is that some families in our program for the first time are employed full-time. And they have good jobs, and they have great income coming in. So they have an increased opportunity to provide for their families. However, their children may still be unsupervised while they're working to provide a better life. So that can create some more problems. Some parents may not be able to help their children with schoolwork, so that's another way that we can come in and help. But another great impact is we have more mentors. We have mentors from Texas and California and Wyoming, so very interesting. And those are really good people. Okay, number 2 is our finances. We are working on our sustainability plan. I think I talked to you about this a year ago. Our Friendship Drive is going on right now, which is our annual appeal to the community. The national recession, as you know, has diverted money really away from a lot of the social programs, including mentoring. So we are looking at how to deal with that, and it's going to be with local fundraising, local events, and creating a sustainability plan. Let's see. Right now, we are projecting a $44,000 deficit for 2012. We've made cuts already, as you know, through this current year. We've made enough cuts to sustain our current services, such as office hours, secretarial support, and so forth. We might have to cut more, which would mean kids are going to wait. That'll be the next issue we'll have to deal with. Let me see what we got next year. Okay, so just how can people help? Of course, they could volunteer to mentor a child. They could help with or attend events or financially support our special events. In April, we have our chocolate affair. We've got the Global Golf Scramble in May and Family Fun Day coming, or excuse me, April and June, and then Family Fun Day in July. And also, we still have our recycling program, so I got to thank the city for allowing us to put additional those aluminum recycling bins on each site, and we're starting to see some collections from that. So people do want to recycle, and they do want to help their community. Okay, so Best Friends, making a positive difference in children and families, one at a time. And at this time, I do want to thank the Commission for including us in your budget again next year. That shows us that you do support the program, but also shows us that you have confidence in what we're doing. And I do have some board members here in the audience. If you want to ask me any questions or ask any of them anything, again, I just want to thank you for your time and your support.
Thank you, Mrs. Fair. Any comments or questions here?
Ms. Fair, today I think I signed my name in 5 squares for some fundraising event that you guys have.
Yeah.
Would you like to explain that?
Well, that's something that one of our board members came up with. It's a raffle that businesses conduct. It's a squares board, 100 squares on the board, and you can put in $1 for each square that you want to sign your name in. I think American Bank Center gives away a day of vacation, and then they alternate it with something like a really nice jacket. And we randomly draw at Best Friends once a month, and I just email over the winning number, and whoever name's on that square, they get the prize, but the $1 goes to Best Friends. So as an example, American Bank Center has been doing this raffle for a while. In a year's time, they will donate, the employees, through $1 every month, will donate $1,200 to Best Friends, which is enough to mentor a child for a year and a half. So we're looking for other businesses that might want to get involved. We've got a couple that have called, and they're working on how they can get that started at their business. I think it's pretty fun. I think people enjoy a raffle.
I didn't intend to get my company's name in there. I guess it didn't come to mind, but this is a monthly.
It's monthly.
event for you guys.
Once a month. Yeah. So that's one more way people can just be involved. It only costs $1 to put your name on a square, and sometimes that's where people are at.
Anything else?
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, we'll fine Commissioner Steiner for getting a commercial in there for his company, and we'll donate that fine to Best Friends, okay?
Yeah, that would be nice. How big is that going to be, Carson?
I'll match anything the mayor puts in.
Whoa, thank you.
Maybe.
Okay. I have 5:15 on my wristwatch, so we have a public hearing scheduled for 5:15. At the previous meeting, City Administrator Kessel reported on and recommended that the commission stipends be increased. And at that meeting, we said that we would schedule a public hearing and hear from the public, allow them to weigh in on whether or not there should be any increases, and if so, how much. So at this time, we'll declare that public hearing open. Anyone that wishes to comment on this topic may do so. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Anybody from the public? There's no one from the public, so we'll declare the public hearing closed. Mr. Kessel, you have a handout or a memo here in our packet. Maybe you can just quickly go through the contents of that memo, and then if the commission wants to act on this, they can.
Thank you, President Johnson. In the memo, I outlined the current stipend. Each commissioner gets $700, and the president of the commission gets $900. And the average, when you look at Bismarck, Jamestown, Mandan, Williston, Grand Forks, West Fargo, and Minot, are included in that. For the commissioner, the average is $600 and essentially $20. And for the president of the commission, it's basically $1,200. So we are a little bit behind the average when it comes to the president of the commission, and maybe slightly ahead of the average commissioner-based stipend. What I've proposed is raising both the commission stipend to $800 from $700 and the president from $900 to $1,150. I know that all of you put in a great deal of time related to these positions. I don't think that time commitment is going to go down in the future. These stipends haven't been raised in over a decade, so certainly just factoring in inflation, which I didn't figure in, it should be well above that amount. I believe that you are deserving. Certainly one of the questions that has been posed to me is timeliness. When, if you vote, when should these become effective? Should it become effective upon the next term? Should it become effective January 1 or some other time frame? So that I didn't address, but I certainly think that the commission should probably consider an effective date if they make a motion to approve these stipends, which I would like to say again are worthwhile.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any comments or questions here by commissioners?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner.
my concern isn't so much for the members that are sitting on this board right now as it is for the future members that will be sitting on this board. And I think, you know, if you say time is money, there's some individuals that are sitting on boards where it costs them more money to sit on that board than what they're making in just lost business per se. With that being said, I know we could have like 4 new commissioners in the next voting round. I think that could add to the pool of people that wanted to run if they know that they're going to be compensated for somewhat of their time.
Okay. Thank you for your comment.
That's all I'm going to say.
That's all you're going to say? Well, I'm glad we don't pay you by the word. Anybody else would like to comment?
Mr. President,
Mr. Jackson?
you know, if you look at the numbers, and we have to take our individual names out of this, looking at these positions in the future, if you look at the numbers, it appears more that we might be out of balance with the president's position than other members of the commission. I think it's true. I think we're all spending more time at this job than we once did, and that's fine. We've made that decision based on probably not the stipend that we're getting. But in the future, and I think it's the point Mr. Steiner's making, that there may be people who might run for these positions who, you know, it will affect their livelihood, at least it could affect their livelihood. So I think it's okay that we consider this. Personally, I would be okay, and I don't know what the rest of you think, if we approve these increases, that we approve them, I don't know how to say it, but based on, as new individuals come on this commission. In other words, if one of us runs again next June and is reelected, we wouldn't be eligible for the increase. And that will take a certain question out of this whole process. But as new individuals come on the commission, they would then receive the new, the increased stipend. And I'd be okay with that.
I would agree with that. I would agree with, we knew what the pay was coming in, and so I have no problem with that at all. So,
Other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Frenzel?
I would agree that the stipend should be increased for the incoming commissioners. So basically, we're looking at June of next year before it would take effect. I'm not so sure that there should be a distinction between commissioners, you know, one's going to make 700, the other's going to make 800. I'm not convinced that that's, I know you don't want to do something like that, I'm not going to be here, so it doesn't make any difference, but to me at least. But I'm not so sure that it's the fairness of it outweighs the fact that you don't want to vote for an increase for yourself. I mean, I understand that, but I'm not sure the public is going to make that an issue. I think it's important to reflect on a couple of misnomers that are out there too, and one would be that as commissioners, we don't receive any insurance benefits. I know that's been a misnomer before, is that once you're on the city commission that you get health insurance or something like that through the city, and that's not the case, or that you get retirement or that you continue getting your stipend after you leave office, and that's not the case either. The stipend is essentially during your time in office, and once you leave office, any benefit, that was the benefit, and that leaves once you leave office as well.
Well, I guess I'm the only one that has said anything. I think if we're going to increase them, we should increase them effective July 1st of next year. That would be after the election, and I agree with Commissioner Frenzel that they would be effective for every commissioner, whether you're brand new or have been reelected, or in Commissioner Altman's case, he'd be in the middle of a term. So that would be my recommendation. What would you like to do? Now, if you give us something in general that you'd like to do, we could have Attorney Colling drafted into a resolution and just place it on the next agenda if we give him some idea of what you would support, and you could deal with it then.
Mr. President, and I'm okay with that methodology as well. That's fine. None of us may be here next July. We don't know. I think the idea of a resolution is a good idea.
I'd support the idea of a resolution also.
Okay, with the July 1st?
That's fine.
Okay.
July 1st was fine.
That would be 2012. So would you be willing to put it into a resolution form for us? And
Mr. President, I'll do that, and we'll have it for you at the next meeting.
okay, thank you. I think the prosecutor contract award could take a little extra time, so I'm going to skip over that and go to item F, the CVB board members, and Mr. Kessel, can you introduce that item?
Certainly, President Johnson. The city appoints a visitors committee via the ordinance. That visitors committee traditionally has been the same members that are on the CVB board. Holding true to that tradition, we have several new members of the CVB board. We have listed those for you. I can certainly go through their names. We are very appreciative of these people volunteering their time. Robbie Kuderna from KQCD-TV, Wayne Rao from the Pizza Ranch, Bruce Dalzell from American State Bank, Bernie Marsh from the Esquire Club, Elaine Myron from the Ramada Grand Dakota Lodge, and Nancy Kostelecki from Vintage Liquor. There is likely to be one additional name that we will bring to you after the next CVB meeting, so please be aware that this isn't a all-inclusive list and that there'll be one additional appointee for you to ratify if you so choose. So I put before you the list of Visitors Committee members, and if you have any questions, I'll certainly try to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Would there be a motion approving this list as the city's visitor committee?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just that differentiation, we're really appointing the visitors committee
Right.
and not the CVB board.
Exactly.
Okay, I
Yep.
think that's important to note.
Yep. Other comments? Hearing none, we'll vote on the motion. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We have a public hearing scheduled for 5:30. I've got about 5:28 on my watch. I think we'll declare that public hearing open. This is on a rezoning petition, and Mr. Kutan, is this yours to introduce?
Yes, President Johnson. President Johnson, Commissioners, this is a rezoning petition for Prowse First Subdivision. The petition request is for a zone change from light industrial to low-density residential for the west one-half of Lot 1, Block 1 of Prowse First Subdivision. The property is located to the west of Highway 22 and to the north of 16th Street Southwest. The applicant is requesting a rezone to allow him to build a residence on the westerly half of Lot 1 and to work on Lot 2, which is currently zoned light industrial. The Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval. Mr. President?
Okay, and does this have an ordinance number?
Mr. President, this would be ordinance 1436.
1436, all right. Well, at this time, the public hearing is open. Anybody that wishes to comment regarding this proposed ordinance, number 1436, may do so. Just come to the podium at this time, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Anybody from the public? There's no one from the public, so we'll declare the public hearing closed, and I would invite commissioners or other city staff to make any comments regarding this proposed ordinance. There's no comments. Would there be a motion regarding the first reading of ordinance 1436?
I'll move for approval of first reading 1436.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We'll go back then to tab 4, and we'll do the prosecutor contract award. And Mr. Kessel, are you introducing this item?
Thank you, President Johnson. I am. If I could just step back to the CVB Visitors Committee, I want to thank Elaine Myron from the Ramada Grand Dakota. She did a nice job in recruiting members to that board. So I just wanted to publicly say thanks to Ms. Myron. On the Prosecutor Contract Award, the city did issue a request for a proposal to obtain interest in the Municipal Prosecutor Services contract. We did receive 2 timely submissions and a third that was not timely. The 2 timely submissions come from Ebeltoft-Sickler, our current city attorney, and Macoff Kellogg. Both submissions met our requirements in terms of timeliness and completeness. I will say that both are very good submittals. I think that from a quality perspective, we can't go wrong. I did have a conversation with both of the primary attorneys mentioned, Mr. Gertz and Mr. Kohling, and I'm satisfied. I also spoke with our current judge, our municipal judge, and he also reiterated that he has worked closely with both of these attorneys and would work well with either of them. You can see from the documents themselves that their fee structures are much different in terms of what they're requesting for a retainer. The Macoff Kellogg firm is requesting a $5,000 monthly retainer and assigning approximately 30 hours of work to that retainer agreement. If you go to the Ebeltoft-Sickler proposal, they are suggesting a $2,400 monthly retainer, and that all other work would be billed on an hourly basis, much the same as Macoff Kellogg. In terms of the hourly rate that would be charged for each, I believe that's the same amount per hour, so that is similar. The difference is the retaining amount and the type of things that will be included in that retainage agreement. When you work out the numbers, if there's less time involved in this contract, financially we're better off with the Ebeltoft-Sickler offer. As you move forward with many more hours, and when I say that I mean 30, 60 hours a month, that difference becomes rather minute. It is almost essentially the same. So really, the difference in the two is in the, at least financially, is in the smaller amount of hours. If we're under 15 hours, 20 hours in that range, if that's the case, then Ebeltoft-Sickler financially is the best firm to award to. I believe that from a quality spec perspective, we're going to get similar service. I do also believe that having the same firm represent us, be our city attorney and be our prosecutor, has some advantages. And since the financially, I believe we are going to be better off with Ebeltoft in terms of the low-hour situation. In talking with the judge, he doesn't feel that there are a great many hours involved in prosecutor services. Now, there's no telling how that will grow over time. As our community grows, you've heard our calls for service have increased. That means there's a certain amount of those that do turn into municipal court processes. And we have a role in the civil side with property and code enforcement. So my recommendation to the City Commission would be to hire the Ebeltoft-Sickler law firm for our prosecutor services. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Did, in their proposal, did they give an estimate of hours for their $2,400 a month? Like Macoff Kellogg said, their $5,000 a month, they assumed about 30 hours.
Yeah, that proposal included all of the court time, so it's about, I think, in talking with Attorney Kohling, I believe it was about 16 hours a month that they anticipated would be under the retainage agreement, and the rest would be billed hourly.
What are the types of things, types of activities that would lead to a billable hour?
That changed under each of the agreements. In each case, anything on the civil side would be an hourly billable time. So if, for instance, we had to bring to the civil side tall grass or a zoning that's not in compliance, something of that nature, that's going to generate a municipal, an hourly bill. In the Ebeltoft, anything outside of the court process will generate a bill. It just depends on which of the two we're speaking to.
Do we have many of those kinds of instances where we're outside I guess, I don't want to call it criminal, but I guess these are mainly traffic offenses that we're prosecuting, right?
Right.
Do we have many, do we have much of a history of having services required for something other than traffic?
We don't today. That may change again. We're seeing more and more of what I'll call those civil infractions, more of those zoning and code violations that we really would like to pursue. It's one of those things that sets us apart maybe from other communities that have had the similar type of oil impacts that we've experienced. If we don't pursue those civil violations, those zoning code issues, we may see a deterioration in the physical look of our community. We certainly don't want that to happen.
Would that be, those types of things, would that be heard in city court? Okay. We don't have to go to district court for that.
Mr. President, Commissioners, if I can address that briefly, initially, everything would be heard in city court for a violation of municipal offenses. There's a right of appeal at times, depending on the offense and the grading of the offense, and those appeals may be heard in district court or a higher state court, but initially, everything is heard in municipal court.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
How long is the contract for, and how often can it be renegotiated?
Initially, excuse me, Commissioner Oltmans, the initial contract term is 1 year, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we also indicated that it could be for ensuing years in the RFP.
Mr. President?
Mr. Jackson?
I hope we don't have to take those civil actions, code enforcement actions, but I do think we have to be poised I think we have to have the ability to do it in these growth years, these high, fast growth years. What did we do budget-wise in 2012 for this position? Can you remind me what we did there?
I believe at the time of the budget, and Finance Director Johnson couldn't correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we've just extended forth the same expenses that we had in 2010 and 2011 to 2012, and I do anticipate this is going to be more.
I don't think we did.
You think that's incorrect?
I thought we increased it too.
Because the state's attorney, or state's attorney had sent a letter,
Yes.
wanted to terminate the contract, and I believed he had stated in his letter that he doubled our amount. And I think we used that for budget purposes. Here comes Mrs. Johnson. She'll,
Thank you for clearing this up.
yes. Hopefully I'm right and he's wrong.
It's usually the case.
I don't have the exact figures, but I believe it's actually between, I believe we budgeted $35,000, which would have been more than what we had budgeted in the past, but not quite double what we had.
Oh, we're both kind of right then.
I think you're both kind of wrong, but it's good we did increase it. We need to be poised to do that.
So further question, if we do the one-year contract, and we then have the option to continue with that firm that we selected, but we also have the option of renegotiating that fee on a yearly basis as well.
That's correct, Commissioner Oltmans. At the end of the term, or as it's approaching the end of the term, we have the ability to continue or to renegotiate, or excuse me, to renegotiate what will happen in the ensuing year.
Other comments or questions? In your request for proposals, did you put a time certain on it that proposals received after that time would not be considered?
President Johnson, we did. The time certain was Friday. When we set that date, I didn't realize that that was a federal holiday, and knowing that there is no mail delivered on Friday, we did accept submissions until the following Monday. So that did allow for, to compensate for that 1 day of mailing that didn't occur. using that methodology, both of these were timely submissions.
Okay. Well, again, you've heard the presentation, the recommendations, you've had the opportunity to read all the material here in our board book or meeting book. Would there be a motion regarding this item?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Frenzel?
I propose the Eagle-Toffin secular contract be approved.
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? There's no other discussion. We'll vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. I'm assuming this is effective beginning the first of the year, then, is that?
That would be correct.
Okay. All right, that brings us to item G. This is Cook's third edition annexation. Mr. Colling, are you introducing this item?
I am. Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, the proposed resolution before you is a resolution finding that the owners of less than 1/4 of the territory proposed to be annexed have filed written protests. If you will recall, back on October 3rd, you passed a resolution calling for the annexation of what is now Cook's third edition and some property to the north. And in that resolution, by state law, property owners within the proposed annexed area have 30 days in which to file protests. The resolution and notice of this hearing has been published. As required by state law, we have notified the county as well as the property owners involved of this hearing as well. And the city has received no protests, no written protests to the annexation. Accordingly, the passage of this resolution is in order, finding that the owners of less than 1/4 of the property proposed to be annexed have filed written protests. Upon passage of this resolution, we would record a map of the annexed area and a map of the annexation resolution, and this property would be annexed to city limits. Mr. President.
And what's the resolution number?
Mr. President, this would be Resolution 67-2011.
You've heard Mr. Colling's report. Are there any comments or questions by city commissioners? Not, is there a motion regarding this resolution?
So moved. Move we pass Resolution 67-2011.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion?
Mr. President, I just want to bring up one thing. I think we should pass this resolution. I have no problem with it, but in hindsight, and Mr. Kessel and I had a chance to talk about this a little bit today, this annexation brings us to a section line, which is the middle of a county road, what has been a county road. And I think in the future, when we look at these annexations, we have to maybe go a little bit further. We're going to have potential jurisdictional issues on the road. We know we're going to have future improvements probably on this roadway. So just a little bit of general discussion that I think in the future when we are coming up to a street like this, we need to look a little bit harder and perhaps go a few feet further with the annexation than we did on this one. And we can catch up. It's not going to be a problem with this one. But it's just a feeling I wanted to get out there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Other comments? Not, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Brings us to item H, and that's to hear Mr. Kessel's report.
Thank you, President Johnson. I just have a couple things to report on this evening. The first is the legislative redistricting plan. We spoke a little bit about that already during the election and precinct voting places. In your packets, you have the state redistricting plan, which of course includes 2 districts that will affect the city of Dickinson specifically. As I've mentioned, the district outlines are likely to be either the Hart River on the south side or Broadway. I will mention that the far eastern side of the community, out by the Interstate Exchange, would also be in District 36. The remainder of city limits is in District 37. These redistricting has already been approved by the state legislature, and so those lines are set for the next 10 years.
I thought the western edge of Dickinson over in the state edition, some of that might end up in District 36.
Actually, you are correct, Mayor Johnson. If you look at the inset to the map below, the very western side, in fact, where most of that new development of the State's Edition has gone on, a lot of those new apartments and such, that will be included in District 36 as well. Not quite, District 37 extends kind of where the old boundaries of the State's Edition were before our growth happened. I can get a more distinct boundary line for you at an ensuing City Commission meeting, but that's the best map that I have right now, is that inset map. So
I think what would be interesting if you could, once you have a good map, we put it on an overhead.
Okay.
And you can show it, and then the public also gets a chance to view the lines, because, I think more of, as our population has grown, more of Dickinson is ending up in District 36, and if present trends continue, I suspect 10 years from now, that'll change quite a bit, too.
yeah, another note is 34th or 40th, depending upon if it's in the city or outside the city limits. Anything north of there is also in District 36. Based on that inset map. But I'll get a better picture of that map and bring it to the next City Commission meeting and do exactly that.
Just for the public, these districts now it looks to me like they've tried to keep them between about 13,800 people all the way up to maybe 14,700 people I see. So you think of Dickinson, there's no way all of Dickinson can stay in one district at those numbers. So.
The next item that I have then is a follow-up to the recycling update that we had at the last commission meeting, where I talked about 10th Avenue East. I think it was Commissioner Steiner who asked about the cardboard usage and maybe repurposing one of the collection containers that we use for cardboard for trees. Our cardboard usage is going up. I did talk with the staff. They are reluctant to lose that cardboard container because of that increase. The other reason is cardboard is something that we do actually receive quite some revenue from. It is one of those money makers in the recycling side. So we'd hate to give up a container for something where we are seeing an increase in the amount of recycling going on, and also then the sales that happen for that cardboard we actually make a profit on that as a recycling generally. I would like to add, though, that I did talk about at the last commission meeting the possibility of an infraction for those people who are dumping illegally, for lack of a better word, at those sites. And I did include in your packets an ordinance, a draft ordinance, that would make the dumping of tree materials and such an infraction. Right now, an infraction based on our current ordinance would mean a $500 fine if you're caught dumping materials that shouldn't be there. So unless Attorney Coling would have any other summarization of that ordinance, we would like to bring something like this to the City Commission for approval at a future meeting.
Mr. President, Commissioners, just one brief comment on the ordinance. I think it's good to pass this ordinance and include it in our code. It gives city law enforcement an additional tool to use to try to prevent some as Mr. Kessel called it, the illegal dumping of non-recyclable materials out at the recycling sites. One of the difficulties I think we will encounter with this ordinance is just the problem of enforcement, of, having law enforcement out there at the time that the dumping of materials is going on. But that is something that we'll have to work through as time goes on. But it will give us an additional tool to try to prevent that sort of thing in the future.
Is there any feedback by commissioners to Mr. Kessel and Mr. Colling on this issue?
Mr. President, just a comment here. I believe that the proper signage there with the fine stated of $500 can deter some of this here. But it is kind of sad to drive by there and see the debris outside of there, see the debris that's not supposed to be in the baler or in the boxes in there. And it does, it kind of defeats the purpose of our recycling project that we have. It costs us actually more money to haul those back out, separate it ourselves, than what we're actually making on the project itself. So, I'd be in favor of making sure we get signs up there with that fine in there, and then if we do, if there is a violation of it, that we do the fine.
Well, I definitely think a $500 fine on the sign would go a long ways towards making you rethink if you're going to drop off the tree limbs or not. And I think more importantly, we established these recycling sites for the benefit of the community, and we heard firsthand from the Best Friends Mentoring Group how they've been impacted by us increasing the amount of drop-offs for aluminum. And I would hate to see us have to scale that back because we have one site that has constant infractions. And I think this would go a long ways towards resolving all those issues.
I don't think we have a problem with the aluminum can.
No, not at all,
but it's,
you're looking at the increased amount of spending that we're doing on one site because there's constantly the tree limbs being dropped off. And then at one of our commission meetings, it was thrown out there, do we take the 10th Avenue one off the loop since it's constantly being utilized wrongly? And I would hate to see us have to do that and pull back any recycling efforts that we're doing on that spot.
Did have a chance to talk with some of the staff as well about fencing it and putting in a gate and making hours available. Of course, that would also take additional staff time in opening the gate, closing the gate, and they're not sure that that would solve the problem. We may just end up with trees outside the gate or simply tossed over the fence. So I don't know that that will solve our issue. We're really hoping that this will help. Right now, there's a sign that says we don't accept branches, and right behind that is the big pile of branches. So if we are lucky enough to catch people doing that, get license plates and such, we would pursue the infraction and offense if this commission passes that. So I appreciate your input if there's any.
Is this something we can put a security camera up and then periodically view the tape if we see an abuse?
Attorney Colling, I guess that's a question for you. Can we do an after-the-fact, so to speak, infraction?
That is a potential possibility that we could set something up of that nature, and it could just be a matter of the technical ability to run a camera out there and have that available. But that's a possibility that we could use.
It's enforceable from the video then?
As long as you can identify the person that is putting the materials there, identify them, then that is enforceable and something that you can prosecute.
Okay.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me like you have support for your ordinance. If you want to bring that forth on the next meeting, you certainly can.
We will do that. The next item then I have is a letter that I sent to General Sprincenatic regarding the Armory building. The LEC was built for a certain purpose and a certain amount of people. And because of the additions of not only the Dickinson police staff, but also because of the additions of the Stark County Sheriff and others, we are quickly outgrowing that facility, and I'm concerned that a long-term plan needs to be developed in order to find a location for our police department to house themselves. One of the obvious choices is the Armory building, number one, because of its proximity to the law enforcement structure, and number two, because it's underutilized as a public building. That is a building that we own. The only tenant that we have in that building is the Armory, or is the National Guard. They do pay us a small stipend each month to house their operations out of that structure. They have also admitted that that building doesn't suit their needs today, as it once did back in the 50s when that was built. The National Guard has changed a great deal since that time. Unfortunately, the funding for a new Armory to meet the National Guard's needs is unlikely in the near future. We do not. I had a conversation with Colonel Tabor today, who's in charge of buildings and sites for the National Guard. Their number one priority project, they don't anticipate the ability to fund that until 2018. That is far outside the window of opportunity, as I see it, for the structure to be utilized in a different manner than it is today. Now, we may have other opportunities. We're going to construct a public works building, hopefully soon. We're anticipating selling our current public works buildings. Maybe that's an interim spot for the National Guard to house themselves until they can construct a building. Colonel Tabor is going to come to Dickinson. We're going to review that option, see if that's something that may meet their needs. He did indicate that from a personnel standpoint, their guard units that are there are growing. So he's concerned that those spaces may not be enough even in the two rooms, or two buildings, but we shall see. So I guess what I'm pointing out is that the National Guard doesn't have the ability to construct a new facility for a great many years, and so unless we do something differently, it looks like that's going to be their house for a good long time. So we'll have to seek other options, assuming that our police department does outgrow that law enforcement center. So I just wanted to add one other comment. I do intend to be at this county commission meeting December 6th. I will be speaking to them about annexations and a joint planner position, a position that we've discussed a few times already at this body. We have a potential joint powers agreement that would allow us to hire a planner and share that services with Stark County. So I'll be presenting it to them at that time. That would conclude my report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Are there any comments or questions for the city administrator? All right, we'll go to tab 5, Public Safety, and we'll hear from the Fire Department. Chief Seebuck.
Good evening, President Johnson, Commissioners. Present the October monthly report of Fire Department activities this evening. And this is a type of graph we don't see very often. We haven't seen something like this for many, many months. A decrease in activities for the month of October 2011 versus 2010 and 2009. This is what I'd like to show you every month. Every month our incidents, our actual calls for service have gone down. I'd also like to attribute this to the month of October being the month traditionally for Fire Prevention Week activities. And there's a lot of messages out there on the media and in the fire department on fire prevention. We'd surely like to believe that that's a part of those decreased activities. I know Mr. Kessel believes that. It doesn't change, however, where we're at year to date, 2011 versus 2010 and 2009. We're still tracking about 35% over 2010. It cut that down a little bit for us, 28% over 2009. October, we had 121 tours, lectures, and demonstrations, and that took the majority of the effort of our fire department staff and personnel. Routine inspections, of course, still happened, as did the follow-ups, but the main effort was the fire prevention activities. Part of your packet includes a summary report of fire prevention and public education activities submitted by our fire prevention specialist, Deb Barrows. She did a very good job of summarizing the activities up to October 27th. One of the things that happened again this year, of course, is we had all the kids come through the fire hall. We'll show you some pictures of that in a minute. In addition to our training activities for the month, we had the Fire Instructors Conference attended by Assistant Chief Curtis Freeman, October 7th through the 9th. North Dakota Firefighters Memorial, October 12th, was attended by myself and Fire Prevention Specialist Deb Barrows at the State Capitol. We conducted fire drills at Dickinson State University's student housing, Villard Terrace and Villard Square. We had members take part in the wide area search training, October 18th through the 20th. That was Mr. Hartman and again Assistant Chief Freeman. Fire Prevention Seminar, October 20th through the 22nd, again was attended by our Fire Prevention Specialist and by our Fire Inspector, Mr. Selly. Special Operations Training for the month was Patient Rescue from High Angle. Our regular monthly training in October was pressurized propane gas, liquid propane gas fire. And in this training sequence and in this training scenario, our firefighters have to approach live fire, as you see here, access a valve and shut the fire off by turning that valve off. So it teaches teamwork, and it teaches hose and nozzle practices, and it also lets them experience just how powerful a fire like that can be. This is a training scenario that we're very proud to say Commissioner Steiner took part in one time, and did very well, actually. Again, Fire Prevention Week took the majority of our effort. It was the 9th through the 15th, and actually, for our department, it continued through the 27th of October. At that time, by the 27th of October, our staff had spoken to 1,102 students. The students again come to the fire hall and receive age-specific lessons, along with the tour of the station and looking at the trucks, of course. Neighborhood visits is something we started several years ago, where one night of Fire Prevention Week, we take a couple of the trucks. We take several of the trucks to two different parks. This year was the Optimist Park and Pride Park on the south side. It's very well received from the public. We have a tremendous turnout of parents and kids that come to take a look at the trucks, meet our firefighters. We'll talk about, they'll field questions on smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, and of course, the kids get a ride in the truck, all of them seat belted in properly, and we still suspect that a lot of the parents bring the kids just so the parents get that ride in the truck, but that's okay. It's a great resource for us in meeting the community. And this next segment, I just wanted to show you for information. There can't be a conversation that happens anymore that doesn't talk about the oil impact and the oil fields, the oil around the city of Dickinson. Well, these pictures that just came up are pictures of all oil well sites and tank battery sites within city limits. We currently have 5 oil-producing wells and 4 tank batteries within city limits, as well as 1 saltwater disposal tank, disposal well with tank. Future annexations or annexations that have just happened will bring 5 additional wells and 3 tank batteries and another saltwater injection site into city limits. The next picture I'm going to show you isn't to scare you, and it also isn't in Dickinson, and it isn't in North Dakota. It's a saltwater injection well site struck by lightning in Texas. And it's interesting because when you talk about wells, you usually talk about crude oil and crude oil production, the inherent possible hazards related to that. And sometimes when we talk about a saltwater well or a saltwater injection site, it's spoken about like, well, it's a water well, it's not a hazard. That's a saltwater injection well site after a lightning strike. The oil tanks or the storage tanks on those sites typically are fiberglass instead of steel. So yeah, it's most definitely a hazard, most definitely the same concern, if not as much or more of a concern as any other well site. And with that, that concludes my report. If there's any questions, I'll answer them, or try to anyway.
Well, very good, Chief. Any comments or questions for Chief Seelock? All right,
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll hear from the police chief.
Hi, good evening, Mr. President, members of the commission. I have before you tonight the October 2011 monthly report from the police department. In October, you see we had 107 total traffic accidents. Seven of those involved injuries, and 24 of them were hit-and-run accidents. October, there's a total of 515 traffic stops conducted. Broken down, there are 368 citations issued and 132 warnings issued. Calls for service in comparison from October of 2010 to October of 2011. You can see that in 2010 we had 1,676 calls for service, and for this year, for October, we had 2,101 calls for service. So we still remain above that 2,000 mark. Comparison from year-to-date to October, last year we were at 15,657 calls at the end of October, and this year we're at 17,155 calls for service at the end of the month. Kind of want to do a little bit of, give you guys a little bit of information as far as where we're sitting for staffing at this current time. Right now we're budgeted for 33 spots. We're budgeted to have 33 sworn officers on staff. Right now we're at 30. We got 3 spots that we are trying to fill. Advertising for those positions closed on Friday, and we're going to be going through the hiring process again. In January 1 of 2012, we're allocated to have 34 officers. As long as we're staffed and we have 33 sworn officers hired, but by then we want to have 1 officer assigned just to the truck traffic position. And then in September of 2012, we're going to add we're budgeted to add 2 additional staff members on, and so our plans are to place them on a power shift. Our support staff are non-sworn members of our department. We have 11 dispatchers. 10 of them are full-time, and 1 of them are part-time. We have 5 support positions. We have 1 administrative assistant, 1 public safety support supervisor, 1 animal warden, 1 support service specialist who supervises records, and she's also cross-trained in dispatch, and we have 1 records clerk. On November 17th, police department's senior management and every position from a senior patrolman to the chief, we met and we kind of developing our strategic plan. We want to develop about a 3 to 5 year plan, what direction we think the police department needs to go to incorporate the growth of the community, and some of the issues that we're going to deal with. It was a very productive meeting, and we plan on having another one of them right around the first of the year to continue on and develop our plan. Do you have any questions regarding what I presented to you so far? At this time, I invited Sergeant Dave Wilkie to come to this meeting tonight and kind of do a little bit of presentation on what they're seeing in the Criminal Investigative Unit and stuff that we expect that we're going to face in the near future.
Mr. President, Commissioner meetings, thank you. Commissioners, I'm Sergeant David Wilkie with the Dickinson Police Department. I am the sergeant in criminal investigations right now. I started in criminal investigations April of 2010. With my going into criminal investigations, we moved 3 new officers in, and basically we're a new group. The group that we have in there right now is myself, Senior Officer Kylan Klauser, Senior Officer Ron Van Dorn, and Detective Travis Lyons. Each one of us has over 5 years' experience, with me being the most right now at 12 years. The responsibilities of our unit are many, as you can see there. Our major responsibility is investigating the major crimes which happen within our city. We take care of the murders, the homicides, and all the major crimes, assaults,
burglaries, robberies, everything like that. We also do the follow-up for the street officers due to the fact that they are on shift work. A lot of times they'll have 2-3 days off in a row. So what they'll do is they'll forward their cases to us, which we will follow up on then also. We are also responsible for after-hours on-call for major crimes. Each one of our officers takes a week-long on-call. That is from 5 o'clock in the evening till 6 o'clock in the morning. Any major event happens, that investigator gets called in to start the investigation immediately. We also do background and internal investigations within the department. We maintain our department's evidence. We do city court security. We do talks, take walk-in calls when the street officers are busy. We do sex offender compliance checks, polygraphs for our new hire in criminal cases, and we also handle cyber crimes within our department. Some of the specialized training that we have in our unit is we have a polygraph operator. One of our detectives is a CAD zone computer operator. CAD zone is a crime scene diagramming program that we purchased, and it allows us to do three-dimensional diagrams of crime scenes. We also have an ICAC task force officer. ICAC is Internet Child Crimes Against Children. He does computer work looking for sex offenders who are trying to lure children. We also have one of our officers is reinitializing the Badlands Crime Stoppers coordinator. He's a Badlands Crime Stopper coordinator. I am involved in the Human Rights Committee and also the Team Committee. Both the Human Rights and Team Committee deal with social services and other agencies. The Human Rights Committee deals with actually exactly what it says, making sure that human rights people in our able facilities and other facilities, that their rights are being observed and not being stomped on. And our Team Committee, we staff social service cases. And just so that you know, we're not just doing crime enforcement, we're also doing other things out there. Our 2011 calls, this is kind of where we're sitting at right now. CIU has handled a total of 589 cases this year. Crimes against person are at 88, crimes against property at 154. We have assisted other agencies such as Social Services, Stark County, with 37 cases. We've done background checks, which includes the Best Friends program, landlord program, other programs. We've done 150 checks. We've worked 8 drug cases. This is the only low number I have. And the reason this number is low is because these are drug cases that we've worked outside of dealing with the drug task force. What we have a history of doing is any cases that we come across, drug cases, we refer the drug task force to those cases. They then take ownership of that case and we become an assisting agency. These 8 represent the cases that we did ourselves. And other calls, which include general information calls, court security, death calls, polygraph exams, and so on, come out to 152 cases this year that we've worked. Now this graph shows where we are in comparison to last year. And the one thing that I find very interesting is our other crimes. You'll see that it's almost the same as last year, but in other areas such as crimes against person, crimes against property, our checks and assists, we've increased quite a bit, which shows that not only are we doing the same work that we were doing last year, we're doing quite a bit more. The numbers are actually quite convincing. Crimes against person, we saw 131% increase this year, with 300% increase in assaults and 314% increase in sex offenses. Now, part of the sex offense increase is because of the fact that we have put an ICAC operator in effect in this area this year, and he has done a wonderful job for us. In property crimes, we've seen a 202% increase, with 196% of the increase being in theft of burglaries in theft of property. We've seen a 400% increase in burglaries. Our drug cases, our drug crimes have gone up 166%. with most of it being methamphetamine, marijuana, and synthetic marijuana. And then our other crime cases, which I pointed out before, have only gone up 3.4%. Those cases include suspicious persons speaking with an officer, and alcohol crimes, and mental health issues. Our landlord program and our background checks, we've increased 57%. One of the things that we do also is we do the sex offender reports. The reports are mandated by the state. They don't really give us regulations on how we do it, but this is the database and the reporting technique that we've come up with. Every place that you see a green stripe there is what we call a low-risk offender. A yellow stripe would contain a medium-risk offender, and a red stripe would contain the name of a high-risk offender. What we do with our high-risk offenders is we check them monthly. We make sure that they are in compliance with all the regulations that they have to follow in the sex offender registration. With our medium-risk offenders, we check them every 2 months. And with our low-risk offenders, we check them every 3 months. Now, in July of 2011, we participated with the U.S. Marshals Service. We did a operation called Operation Safer, where we checked every sex offender within the Dickinson city limits. We checked 36 offenders, had 100% compliance. On a monthly basis, though, we check 4 high-risk offenders, 7 medium-risk offenders, 11 low-risk offenders, and 4 unclassified. Now, every week I'm receiving at least one more sex offender notification that there is another sex offender moving into our area. With the transient population, we are going to see more people who are forced to register come into our area, and that has proven itself within the last 2 months. My projections for 2012 and beyond is we're definitely going to see an uprise in major crimes. Our numbers already show that. One of the things we're going to see with our transient population is we're going to see more crimes against persons, more crimes against businesses. We're going to see prostitution, and we're going to see drugs come into this area. We also are going to see an increase in sex offenders. With our resident population, we're also going to see an increase in crime against persons, businesses, and drugs. The people who live here are still doing the things that they were doing before. They are just finding a bigger clientele list now with the new people moving in. Are there any questions?
Do you have some specific proposals that you'll be making to the commission at a later date on how to deal with the increased workload?
Well, my proposals are going to be to the chief first, and I'm going to be looking probably for at least one other body back in criminal investigations, just to deal with the workload. Right now, we're busy, and we like to be busy because I think in the past, the officers on the street, whether it's been a true or a not true conception, is that CIU is the place to work because you get to pick your own hours and you're never really that busy. This year we've been very busy. Last year we were busy because we did a major evidence fix on our evidence room and our property receipts and stuff. This year we are just so busy with the incoming crimes that we really don't have any time to do any housework. So yes, to answer to your question, yes, I believe we're going to be looking for more staff in criminal investigations.
I have a quick question. When you're showing the increases, 300%, 400%, you know, at first glance, those numbers are pretty alarming. Would you be able to, I guess, in a future presentation, show us what the before numbers were versus the after? Because a 300% increase if you had 1 crime last year and 3 this year, although it's an increase, it's not quite as alarming as if you had 100 and it turned into 300. And I think we have to be careful as we're moving forward as a city. You know, on Facebook, and you guys have done a good job of stepping in on the myths that are going on there. We haven't reached debacle point as a community, and those numbers that you share with us would be alarming if you don't know the context in which they're related.
Absolutely, and I do want to now post that with, those numbers are not the numbers that represent our city. Those numbers are the numbers that represent what is happening in the Criminal Investigation Unit. Chief Dossinger could present in his next presentation on how much the actual assaults on person numbers have gone up, or how much the sex cases have gone up. But my numbers represent exactly what is coming back to us in criminal investigations. I will tell you honestly that I believe that partially has to do with our turnover. We're looking at more new officers who are not probably at the experience level yet to deal with some of these cases that maybe even last year some of our more experienced officers would have handled themselves. But those numbers represent the workload of 4 officers in the Criminal Investigation Unit, not what is actually happening to the entire city right now. We're not at a 300% increase in sex cases within the city, but we are in the Criminal Investigation Unit.
I think another interesting number to break down just in the future, and you alluded to it in your report, was residential versus transient. Again, perception in the community is that we have a larger transient crime, and when I'm just a layman looking through the newspaper and reading the names, it seems like a lot of local names tied to the crimes that are going on. And so I think that would be an interesting one to keep tracking as well.
And that's a little difficult to track due to the fact that people who are coming into town are going to have a local address when they get here. But you're absolutely right. When people say to me, like when I meet somebody in Walmart and they say to me, boy, this oil field sure must be driving you crazy, huh? And I'm like, you know what? It's the same 1% that we've been dealing with for the last 10 years. Yes, there is an increase because you're going to have people come into our city, and, you know, if they get stuck in Walmart's parking lot, sleeping in their car because they can't find a job, desperation might set in, or something else. Maybe they just got, maybe they're the kind of people that follow this kind of resurgence around and use that as a target-rich environment. You do have people like that, but we're not getting a city full of people like that, no, sir.
Great. All right.
No.
Any other questions or comments? Chief Dossinger, anything else?
No, I just want to make sure that the presentation that Sergeant Wilkie did just kind of showed the activity level within the CIU units. And, you know, that's not the type of increase that we've seen as far as our general calls for service. Just to clarify that again.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we go to tab 6, and this is Public Works, and Mr. Curtin, I think these are all yours.
That is correct, President Johnson. The first item is Cook Meadow Hills 3rd Edition. This is a petition request for final plat approval. The site is located northerly of Cook Meadow Hills 2nd Edition, which was recently approved, and westerly of 10th Avenue West. At the November 16th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, the commission and also city staff recommended approval. City staff is available to answer any questions you may have.
And this is a resolution, and the number is?
Mr. President, this will be Resolution 68-2011.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions for city planner? Not, is there a motion regarding this resolution?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I would like to, at this time, bring up some discussion. I see the owner is here, the contractor. At this time, you're asking for the approval of the final plat for the 3rd edition. Item 6D we're going to be addressing the consideration to approve the second reading and final passage of the third edition, Cook's Meadow. Mr. Cook, if you could approach the podium, please, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
My concern tonight is on your first edition that was completed. What do you understand of the agreement was for you to take care of the buffer zone that runs east and west on the south side of this first edition?
In regards to the trees, is that what we're leading to?
Correct, yep.
We pulled the city commission meeting minutes, which were on the March 21st commission meeting. And what was said in that particular meeting was, the city attorney, Matt Colling, presented a plat that was recommended by the Planning and Zoning Board. The Planning and Zoning is recommending approval of this plat contingent upon a restrictive covenants to be put in place that requires a 12-foot strip of trees to be placed on the southerly property line, lots 6 through 13 of Block 5. Colling suggests these trees be planted prior to the issuance of a building permit for those particular lots. Gene Jackson brought the motion. It was seconded by Commissioner Opmans to authorize introducing Resolution 11-2011 for adoption with the contingency that a covenant be filed ensuring the memorizing of the tree buffer to be planted prior to the issuing of the first building permit and then a 50-foot easement. So our understanding was that we would have to put the trees in upon the issuance of the first building permit for those particular lots. Mr. Colling and I had done a couple of different conversations on that and kind of came, first off, the project wasn't completed until September, mid-September, and after Mr. Colling and I talked a couple of different times, we kind of came up with an assumption that we would put the trees in when the owners got there so that they could maintain them and plant whatever particular trees they wanted to, and of course at that time have their lots landscaped and do whatever trees they wanted to. So we had kind of came up with an agreement that the trees would be planted, but no certificate of occupancy would be given to those particular lots until those trees were put into place. That's what we assumed we would do, but I guess that's not quite what anybody is wanting to have done here. So we have filed the restrictive covenances, that's in place, and in the restrictive covenances, there's a section that we strictly dedicated to the planting of the trees. The covenances were actually filed on Wednesday of last week. And in those, there's a section that says landscape and screening. And in general, it says there's a 12-foot strip of land on the south side of each lot identified herein shall be reserved to plant a row of trees within said strip. The type of trees to be used shall be evergreens or deciduous materials capable of providing a substantially oblique hedge-like barrier and attaining a minimum height of 6 feet within 3 years of planting. Distance between trees shall be as recommended for whatever species of tree is used. All necessary trees to be planted pursuant to this agreement shall be planted prior to any certificate of occupancy being issued on any of the lots subject to this restrictive covenants. An official list of plant materials can be provided through the Office of Zoning Administrator. Upon installation of required landscape materials, each owner shall take appropriate action to ensure their continued health and maintenance. A fence, as per city code, may be installed on the south property line No structures of any kind shall be placed any closer than 12 feet from the south property line, which is, I think, what we all kind of agreed on at that particular point, but I guess the issue came up is that they want it done now. They want the trees in now, and I think that's where we're having a
And here's the situation. When I look back to these meetings and recall whatever I can, I don't think it was the intention that the individual lots put up those trees. I think the intention was that you were supposed to put in those trees, because in the future, you don't know when those lots are going to sell. I mean, you could have a row of lots that aren't going to sell for 5, 6, 7 years. Therefore, we have no buffer zone between your property and the property to the south.
I have a quick question. Has a building permit been issued?
Not for those particular lots,
No, but that wasn't the issue, was it? It was when a building permit was issued, not on those lots. It was...
So there's no building going on in Phase 1?
Well, number one, the lots are all sold, and we have had the purchaser of those lots sign off on these covenants. Number two, I don't have a problem with doing the trees. If you want them in, obviously at this time of the year, now I have contracted with a landscaping company to do the trees. We're not trying to get away from doing it. I guess what we were trying to do was to give each property owner the right to landscape their lot first so that the trees can be put in and not ripped out and re-landscaped. Number two, then there would be somebody there to maintain those trees, water them, take care of them, watch them. And number three, I guess the time of the year right now is not the best time of the year to be planting them. And I do have a letter coming from a couple of different landscape companies that after the first frost is not the right time to be planting. I will contract to put them in. I have that being worked on, and I can present it. I think Mr. Curtant and Sean and I had a conversation on where to take this, and I called Matt a couple of different times. We just haven't connected. So we're not trying to get away from doing the trees. It's just trying to do it right.
Are there any building permits issued in the second edition?
With respect to your question, Commissioner Steiner, I checked with Mel Zent, the building official, and also the secretary, and we have not issued any building permits for that area. There has been construction, yes, the roads are put in, and there's been construction with respect to infrastructure, but there hasn't been any building permits issued for within that subdivision.
So your Phase 2, are you considering Phase 1 completed?
Yes.
First edition?
Well, now it is, yes. I mean, all the contractors have been out of there, northern improvements, so sewer, water, streets, curb, gutter are all in, yes.
Well, there's an assumption out there that, two different assumptions between the parties, the two property owners. And as I mentioned, in all the discussion they had with planning and zoning, and even, I know our motion in the minutes doesn't specifically say that they absolutely have to be, but do you not think that that is one of the requirements that we wanted done last summer before you started in Phase 1, or at least completed Phase 1?
Well, I think it was a requirement that you wanted. It was just how that requirement was to be handled. And again, we're not looking to elude it. We'll put them in. We don't have an issue with it. It was just giving, again, the unlandscaped back portion of those yards. The project just got completed now within the last 30 days. And I would think you as a homeowner would like to be able to landscape your yard before you put the trees in. It was the concern of the maintenance and the concern of probably getting some different growth in there, not one row of evergreens or what have you. But again, I have contracted with a company. We can issue a letter that's been signed. They'll definitely go in the first of the spring. That's about the best I can do.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Cook. So we're still on item A. This is Resolution 68-2011. Is there a motion regarding this resolution? Mr. Croton, what was your recommendation again regarding item A?
President Johnson, both the Planning Commission and city staff recommended approval. There was no conditions attached at Planning Commission. This issue was brought up, and with respect to the issue of trees, I wasn't aware of it. It was prior to my time. Since that time, I've checked the minutes, and I would concur with Mr. Cook. It does state that the trees are to be placed at the time of building permit issuance. We have not issued any building permit for that. And I would recommend approval of this final plat.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Croton. Again, I'll ask, is there a motion?
Can we have a little more discussion here, Mr. President?
Absolutely. Well, just getting a motion doesn't mean we go right to a vote. There's still plenty of time for discussion.
Yeah, might affect the wording of the motion. I don't have a problem approving the third edition plat, but we need to get these trees settled once and for all. Even what Mr. Cook just read us with the motion that apparently was made at City Commission, yes, in hindsight, we could have had more detail, but to me, that motion still says that we intended Mr. Cook to plant those trees along those 6 or 8 lots or whatever there are. I also believe that the intention was to do it before a building permit was issued on those 6 or 8 lots. I don't know if we made that clear, but I think that was the intent. The problem with this situation, or any situation we have with the new subdivision, is that Mr. Cook could sell the whole thing tomorrow morning and not be here anymore. We could have new owners, a new developer, and unless we have this properly memorialized, we're not going to get what we think we're going to get. So, you know, it's not a matter of trust or belief. It's just that things could change. One way we could do this is to approve the third edition plat contingent on Mr. Cook giving us some kind of guarantee on the trees. I don't know if you feel that that's necessary or not.
Mr. Colling, can you weigh in here? I don't know if you reviewed the March 21st minutes in that motion. It sounded fairly detailed to me, but I'd like to hear your comments.
Yes, Mr. President, Commissioners, I have had a chance to look briefly at those minutes, and I would concur with Mr. Corton's assessment of those, that at least as I read the minutes and recall the meeting, that the condition was placed upon those specific lots that border the property to the south, and that it was contingent, the trees were to be placed at the time of the building permit issuance. As Mr. Corton says, a building permit hasn't been issued at this point, so there's nothing that I can see that Mr. Cook is in violation of the at least explicit requirements of the city. You know, I think through all of these development processes, we've learned a lot about how to structure these things, and in hindsight, I think what we would have done and what we would do in the future is, instead of make conditions upon plat approval, to make them conditioned upon a development agreement with the property developer, something that we can have and can detail out those specific requirements, have this body approve it, have it signed by the developer,